Alecia Daniel Hall, attorney and realtor, and I'm here today to talk to you about ways to capitalize in the seller's market. So first of all, let's talk about what a seller's market actually is. We keep hearing, oh, it's a seller's market. What does that actually mean to sellers? Seller's market means we're in a period where there is high demand, i.e. a lot of buyers, and low inventory. The reason why we have such a high demand is twofold. Number one, mortgage rates are still at an all-time low, which means it's a perfect time for a buyer to get that extra loan. You actually have more spending power if the interest rates are lower. And number two, as a result of COVID, a lot of people are looking for more space, more outdoor space, more rooms, because a lot of people are working from home and not so much schooling from home anymore, but a lot of people are in fact working from home, more people than before. And so people are looking for homes that have an extra room that they can use as an office as opposed to, I don't know, their kitchen, okay? And then from the perspective of why the inventory is low. There's a lot of reasons for why inventory is low right now. At the beginning of COVID, the number one reason for the inventory being low was sellers were a little hesitant to sell because it was such an uncertain time, and so they had pulled properties off of the market, or in the instance of people who were just considering selling but hadn't actually put their home on the market yet, a lot of them just decided, you know what, I'm going to wait a bit. And so that was the beginning of the shortage of inventory. But then we had all of these different shortages in the supply chain. So you're not getting as much of a robust new construction as we're used to seeing, because there's so many delays in the supply chain side of getting the materials in. And then once you have the materials here, we're also experiencing a lot of worker shortages because a lot of people are just getting sick and unfortunately passing away. And so you have shortages on multiple aspects of the new construction industry. And as a result, we're also seeing an increase in the supply costs. Labor and material costs are going up, which is naturally going to kind of slow down on the building process. And all of that, all those factors combine to give us what is called a seller's market. And so there are definitely some things that sellers can do right now to capitalize on the market. And I'm only going to go over 7, but there are definitely more than 7 out there. But let's get started. And I do have them written down, so if you see me glancing off to the left, it's because I did write them down and I want to be able to keep track of which ones I've already discussed and which ones I haven't touched yet. So first and foremost, one thing that you as a seller can do right now is you can actually forego some of those upgrades and renovations you were thinking about. Because inventory is so low right now, buyers are a little bit more likely to overlook certain things. And the number one thing they're actually overlooking right now are cosmetic changes, cosmetic things that we should be fixing, could be fixing. They're overlooking those items, which is a good thing for sellers, because you actually will spend a little bit less money getting the home ready to list. Hey. But a couple of things that I would still recommend you go ahead and do. Always go with neutral colors for your paints, and that's regardless of what market we're dealing with, whether it's a seller's market or a buyer's market. Neutral colors are actually easier to sell. I myself, when I sold my first place, it was a condo, and I had an aqua-ish colored wall in the bedroom, the master bedroom. I had 2 accent walls. In my guest room, I had a red accent wall. And in my living room, I had 2 accent walls in the living room. I had one yellow that was like the entry to the kitchen. And then my living room accent, it was like a burnt sienna. I have a thing for earthy tones. So I had a lot of earthy tones. Oh, and I had a red, I don't know if I mentioned that, my guest room had a red accent wall. There's a lot going on. But it looked good, I promise. But when it was time to sell, I did go back to neutral colors, and so I repainted everything. Just simple, like off-white tones. And it also really opened the space. It made it look so much brighter. I didn't change any of the lights, but the place, all of the different rooms just felt so much brighter. One of the bathrooms had a deep orange color to it before I painted it. It was a deep yellow color, and I painted it just another shade of off-white, and it made such a huge difference. I was even surprised. And honestly, after that, I've never done accent walls. I've never painted again because I was just so shocked by the change and how drastic the change felt. And I wasn't a realtor at the time. So, it was just something that I learned just in Googling. So, yeah, paint rooms and go back to more neutral tones if possible. Always remove personal items. And there are different reasons for it. One, we do know for a fact there have been studies that show if the home is owned by people of color, it's going to be appraised a little bit lower. Unfortunately, it has happened and has been proven to happen. But the other reason is you want your home to be as inviting as possible to prospective owners. And one thing you don't want to do is distract them at all. And having photos of you, believe it or not, is a huge distraction from the home. You want them to focus on the home and you want them to be able to see themselves in that home. Number 3, declutter, declutter, declutter. It's so easy to declutter, and it's the number one thing that people don't do. But for example, I work from home, and so I have things on my desk. I have folders, I work with the XP. These are great for, living. I need this stuff. All of this stuff is here because I need it to work. But when you're selling your home, understand that having random papers and random knickknacks actually gives the appearance of clutter. It doesn't give the appearance of order. And if you walk into a home as the buyer and you see clutter, your mind automatically, one, gets distracted by the clutter, but two, you start thinking maybe there's not enough storage in this home. Guess what? That's probably not the truth. That's probably not the reality of your home situation, but that's what a buyer is thinking automatically when they see a lot of clutter. And so you can declutter by getting bins and kind of putting things in those bins. They can be decorative bins. They can be one color, a monotone color type situation, but you want to start organizing. And in a way, if you're planning on selling, you should be planning on moving. And as a result, decluttering is actually a one step towards packing. I also recommend packing as much stuff as you can, putting it maybe in the garage, putting it away, because again, you want to give this space more of an open feel. I kind of segued into it a little bit, but plan to move before you sell. One thing that a lot of sellers don't realize when they're in a seller's market and they put their home up is they don't realize how quickly their home can be under contract. Now, we're not in the market anymore where people are getting 7, 10 offers within 24 hours of being listed. We are still getting multiple offers. They're just not as fast as they were before. So you might be on the market maybe 2 weeks before you get a couple of offers or even your first offer, and that's okay. It's still a seller's market. But most sellers forget that they're selling their home and they want to wait until, closing is in 2 days and that's when they want to start packing. But it's a lot of stuff. You don't realize how much stuff you own until it's time to pack it all up. That's just my experience. So what you need to do, and what I recommend you do, is once you're thinking about selling, start packing. Start packing your things. Obviously the things you don't need as much right now, pack them up, put them in the garage, or if you have one room that you can kind of use for your storage space, but also plan what is your next step. Are you going to buy right away? Do you want to rent? I know quite a few sellers have decided to rent for a few months because the market is very competitive for buyers. And so it's a little bit less stressful if you rent. Even if it's a short-term rental, you might just want to rent for 6 months just to kind of wait it out, or 6 months so you can take your sweet time looking for something to buy. That's something you can do, and you need to, I recommend you plan that out. Plan what your move looks like. Where are you going? Are you going to another state? And if you are going to another state, I can actually connect you with an agent in the state you plan to go. So I really am a one-stop shop. I'm an attorney, I'm a real estate attorney, I'm a realtor, and I do have a global network of agents. I work with eXp Realty, and they're phenomenal in that they allow us to network and connect with agents all over the world. So wherever you intend to go, it definitely makes sense to be paired with two things. One, an agent in that state or city where you intend to relocate to so you can get started with your search. But you also want to get in touch with a lender, and I can connect you with a lender. If it's a lender, if you're going to another state, then I would recommend that you have that agent connect you. And I always recommend that you communicate with multiple lenders, not just one. We shop around for everything. I shop around for shoes. I shop around for cars. We should shop around for the best loan terms that will work for us when we're buying a house. Period. There's no negotiating on that. Okay. Next, pricing, strategic pricing. Now, I get this a lot with my seller clients where they want to list their home at the top of the market. And the problem with that is you're automatically going to cut your potential buyer pool down significantly just by listing at the top. What you want to do is you want to list your property at a number that will not be super low, right? Because if you list it super low, then you have people that'll be like, they'll kind of think, why is it so low? I'm not going to go see it because there must be a reason why it's so low. That's the automatic. So you don't want to be too low either. If you list it too high, then you're going to, first of all, be competing against the market. First of all, you're competing against comparables, and a comparable is a recent sale, recent being within the last 6 months, and you look for a 1 mile geographical location. Now, can you go beyond 6 months? Yes, if you have to. Can you go beyond 1 mile? Yes, if you have to. And you have to if there's nothing else that's comparable that has recently sold within those parameters. So you don't want to go out. You want to stay within that area and within that timeline. Sometimes you have to go out a little bit further. In this market, not so much. In this market, it's pretty easy to find comps. Yes, I'm always cold. It's pretty easy to find comps that are within the requisite parameters, but just so you know, that's what a comp is. You also, when you're listing, you want to be mindful of what your competition is. And your competition would be homes that are currently on the market. So, and this happens when I was looking for homes with the clients in November of last year. I think it was November. We went to see, it was a townhouse. It was a row of 3, right? And unit A was listed at $299 and unit C was listed at $399. Now these are the exact same units. The only difference is one is on one corner and it's A, and the other's at the other corner and it's C. Both had been remodeled. Both were flips. You can tell based on the recent sale, when was it recently sold, and you can look at the pictures because they were both on the MLS previously, and you can see between the last listing and the current listing, you could see that both have been renovated. Great, but $100,000 difference for 2 houses down? I'll tell you what, if that home didn't have, so if unit A wasn't listed, we would have never even bothered to look at unit C because the price didn't match with the neighborhood at all. It didn't match with the comps at all. But since we were there to see unit A, I made sure I got us access to unit C. But it was really not because they were considering it, because the price was just so ridiculous. We were just going to be nosy. So if you price your home too high, you may very well still have some people coming to take a look at it, but they may not be coming to look at it for the purpose of actually buying it or submitting an offer. They might just be looking at it to be nosy, and we literally were just being nosy. We wanted to see, what do they think they did with this home that makes it valued $100,000 over all the other homes? By the way, Unit A had a steady stream of visitors while we were there. Unit C, we were the only ones that went to visit Unit C. And again, same unit, same row of townhouses. I do need to check. I want to check and see because I think Unit C, they did reduce the price. I just don't remember what they ultimately sold for. So pricing is extremely important. And what I do when I speak with and I meet with seller clients, I actually put together a CMA, which is a comparative market analysis, where we're going to look at recent sales, which are, again, comps. We're going to look at the transactions that are pending, which means they're under contract, they just haven't closed yet. And that's really just to get an idea of what they were listed for, because we're not going to know what they ultimately sell for until they sell. Then they'll become comps. And we're also going to look at what your competition would be at that moment if you were to list, and those are going to be your active listings. So it's very, very important to price properly. You don't want to price too low. You don't want to price too high. Also, The number one reason why properties stay on the market for a long period of time is improper pricing. So if you see a property that's been on the market for a super long time, you can typically guess or assume that it's because it was priced high. So don't waste your time by pricing all the way at the top. Believe it or not, you can price in the mid-range and have a whole competitive offer situation, which is when you have multiple offers on the table and still end up at that high level. But you didn't take the risk of listing at the height and getting no responses. Instead, you maybe aimed for more middle of the line, middle valuation, and ended up there because the buyers drove the price up for you. Just, okay. Bidding wars. Yes, bidding wars are a thing. They're still happening, and I kind of alluded to them before. A bidding war happens when you have multiple offers on the table. Now, it's extremely important, and when I have my seller clients and I meet with them to go over their offers, I actually provide a spreadsheet that does the comparison of the key terms so that they know, okay, it's first and foremost, price is not the most important. It's not the only thing you look at. You want to look at the terms. What are the contingencies? In other words, what are the mechanisms that are in this offer that will allow the buyer to walk away? You want to know, are they asking for concessions? Are they asking for the seller to contribute towards closing costs? And if so, then you need to actually do the math to determine what your net would be, because your purchase price, your closing price is not actually what's on the top line that says purchase price if they're looking for concessions. If they're looking for concessions, you have to do the math, figure out what that percentage relates to, because most of the time they're asking for a percentage. It'll say 2% seller's concessions or what have you. So you need to look at that, get the number, and then subtract it from the purchase price to know exactly what their offer's value is to you. Super important. You also want to know the loan type that they're going to be using. And I'm going to do a whole video on loan types because loan types are very important. You have conventional, you have FHA, you have VA, and I feel like I'm missing. You have conventional, FHA, VA. Those are and then of course, cash. You have cash buyers, right? Cash is always king. If you have a cash buyer, you're going to ask for and receive proof of funds with the offer. Do not accept a cash offer without proof of funds because you have no way of validating that they're actually solvent, that they have the cash they claim to have. So you want proof of funds with that offer. And conventional loans are definitely preferred over VA and FHA. And it's simply because a conventional loan has a less stringent requirements and compliance. And so there is a better chance, a stronger likelihood of approval and closing if you have a conventional loan. I'm not saying FHA and VA are bad. They're still great opportunities. And if you only have 3 FHA loan offers, you're going to pick one of those. I'm going to recommend that you pick one of those. But if you have conventional versus FHA, we need to talk a little bit more about why. We need to weigh the pros and cons between the two before we make a decision on which offer we're going to accept. Another key thing to pay attention to when you're looking at your offers is, what is the closing period? Are they looking for a quick closing, so maybe 30 days, or is it going to be a little bit longer, like 60 days? Something else you want to be mindful of is whether the buyer is making this transaction contingent on their own sale of their own home. Because yes, that is a thing, but you want to be mindful of it, because if you have everything else is the exact same. You have 2 offers and everything's the same except you have one buyer that needs to sell their home. You may want to go with the other offer where there aren't any contingencies of selling their home. Just, again, when you're weighing your offers, you need to weigh much more than just price. And a lot of times sellers only want to focus on the price, but there's so much more that's important in the offer. And so, key. The highest offer is not always the best offer because you're going to have other things in there. And so terms are extremely important. Terms are actually, I'd say, more important than, no, let's say they're just as important. And again, your contingencies are important. Concessions are super important. Move-in dates, check that. you may need to stay in the home for longer than the closing. And if so, that's something you need to negotiate up front with the buyers, because if you want to stay, most buyers want to move in right away. But if you want to stay, you need to let them know up front, which means, remember when I was talking in the beginning about having your moving plan in order before you list? This is why it's important. If you know for a fact that you're going to need maybe 30 days after closing for you to move out, for you to get situated, then you need to make sure that this is put in up front in your offer, in the contract, because your contract terms have to be there. And the buyer should know that this is something you want before they've started spending money on appraisals and inspections. And then, number one thing that we're seeing right now are appraisal issues. And so I'm going to talk about it. What happens if your home doesn't appraise at the purchase price? And this does happen. It's happening a lot right now, simply because there is a lag between the appraisals in the appraisal process. So they are behind. So there are a couple of things that you can do if it doesn't appraise as high. First of all, understand that the lender is not going to pay more for the home than it's worth, and they deem value based off of the appraisal. So the appraisal is extremely important to the loan. So if you have a buyer that is using a loan, regardless of whatever type of loan it is, you're going to have an appraisal issue if the home doesn't appraise for the purchase price, and you have to deal with it. And there are a couple of ways to deal with it. One, you can be the seller that refuses to negotiate. Understand that there is a contingency in place, and if you do not negotiate on the purchase price to come down at all, then the buyer, as long as they have the contingencies in place, as long as their agent represented them properly and have these contingencies in the contract, the buyer is going to be able to cancel the contract and walk. Your second thing you can do is you can negotiate on the purchase price. You can come all the way down to the appraised value, or you can meet halfway or somewhere else in the middle between the buyer and the seller, between yourself and the buyer. And the way you would do this is you would come down in price, and the buyer would have to come out of pocket for the difference, whatever it is. And the third thing you can do is you can actually dispute the appraisal. Now, I have personal experience with this because when I sold my condo in 2016, we had an appraisal issue. The property appraised for less than the purchase price. Now, I knew automatically that the appraiser did a really bad job. He used inferior buildings as comparables because he didn't want to do the work. My building was on the water, but my unit was on the street side. And there had not been any recent sales of units on the street side in my building within 6 months. So rather than him using the units that sold on the water side of the building and applying the adjustments, he decided to use a building next door that had street sales. And those were the comps that he used. The problem is my building had so many renovations. I mean, it was a beautifully updated building, whereas the building next door had none. So automatically, that's the first issue. And the second issue was the units themselves were pretty inferior to my unit. But the most important thing was he was using the wrong building. You couldn't just take those prices and apply them to my building without any adjustments. So I paid out of my pocket for another appraisal, which you can always do as a seller. And they did come up. My appraisal was higher. I don't remember the exact numbers anymore because this was in 2016, but it was appraised higher when I did my appraisal, and we sent that appraisal into the lenders, and they sent it to their appraiser. And he did come up more. He didn't come all the way up to purchase price, but I had a decision to make. Was I going to come down at all, or was I going to just let the buyer figure it out? And I decided I would let the buyer figure it out because I knew that my unit was worth more than I had even gone under contract for. I already knew that, number one. Number two, I also knew I didn't have to sell. I just wanted to sell. I didn't need to sell that unit at all. I just wanted to get rid of it. Fine. And I knew that the buyer wanted my unit more than I did because he had a boat, and my building was the only building on that street that actually had its own dock that was available for owners of the building, in the building. So he actually had himself, he was already on the wait list and he didn't own the unit yet. So I knew he wanted that building and that unit more than I did. So in the end, I refused to come down, and he had to pay out of pocket for that difference between the increased appraised value and the ultimate purchase price. And he did, and we closed on time. We didn't have any delays in closing, and that worked out for me. Understand, though, that with an FHA loan, that is not an option. If your buyer has an FHA loan, number one, they cannot come out of pocket for the difference. That is not allowed. But also important with an FHA loan is the fact that that FHA appraisal will stay with your home for 6 months. I know they just changed the timeline. I believe it's 6 months now. So what that means is if it appraises low and it's an FHA loan and that seller walks, it is what it is, you refuse to come down and that seller walks and you get another FHA buyer within that 6-month period, that prior appraisal is going to stand for that property. So be careful when thinking about whether you're going to negotiate these appraisals, because there are things that are very important that you need to know. And the last thing that I'm going to give to you as my little nugget of a tip and a trick for maximizing your earning potential in this competitive seller's market is get yourself aligned with a knowledgeable realtor. You need a real estate professional. I know a lot of sellers, a lot of homeowners prefer to try and save money by not paying an agent. But here's the thing. First of all, if you look at the numbers, most people actually lose money by not paying agents because they're going to undersell. They undervalue. That's just, the numbers are there. The data doesn't lie. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, selling and buying a home is a huge legal decision and transaction. You're going to have contracts involved. The contracts have all kinds of terms, and all these terms mean things. They have deadlines. The deadlines are real. They're not fake. They're not recommendations. These are hard deadlines that need to be negotiated. And if they're going to be modified, you need to modify them properly with the right language in the written agreement. Also, pricing. Like I said before, pricing is extremely important. And so I highly recommend that you have a knowledgeable real estate professional help you with the pricing decision. But most importantly, as I went through before, all offers are not created equal. And you should have someone who knows real estate inside and out assisting you when you're comparing offers. Because at the end of the day, you want to make the best decision for yourself. And one thing that we as agents do is, well, the good ones at least, we market. We are your marketers. You list your property with me. You're going to get professional photos. Photos and videos sell homes. If you have waterfront property or a huge lot, I'm also going to do a drone video and drone images to show where you are in relation to that water, how large your lot is. If you have a lot with multiple properties, multiple units. So sometimes you might have a guest house or a pool house. I want the aerial footage because I want to show people this is the layout of this property. So you're going to get professional stuff. Again, photos and videos sell homes. You're going to get listed on the MLS, which, just so you know, when you go onto Zillow and Redfin and Realtor.com, those websites actually pull from the MLS. They're not the MLS. Agents list properties on the MLS, and the MLS does update in real time. So if I go in right now and I change status of one of my listings, it's going to show right now. Whereas if you look at that same listing on one of those third-party sites, it may not be there right away. It might not be there even today because those update on a time. There's some sort of a time interval, and nobody knows what the time interval is, but it's not real time. I'll tell you that. So you're going to get your most accurate listings from the MLS where I'm going to post it. The thing about the MLS is that's where agents play. We play on the MLS. So when an agent has a new buyer, they're going to the MLS to do their search for prospective homes that work and fit that buyer's parameters. One of the other things you're going to get if you use an agent such as myself is once I have something listed, I'm going to send mailers out to people in the neighborhood because, believe it or not, your neighbors know people. They have friends, they have family that might be interested in living in that neighborhood. I'm also going to reach out to agents who've had recent sales in that area. And that's because those agents most likely have connections. They know people who wanted to buy the home that they had listed, but for whatever reason weren't able to. So they can reach out to those people. I'm also going to reach out to agents who've had recent purchases in that area. So there's all these different things you're going to get with a professional. Oh, one other thing I do is there's something called reverse prospecting. So no, I don't have direct access to other agents' portals. So I can't go into their portal and see. But if they're listing on the if I'm listing on the MLS and they're doing their searches in the MLS, they're the same MLS. So what does happen with reverse prospecting is the agents who have clients who have homes that match my parameters, or well, my home matches that parameter, they're going to get an email from me. They're actually going to automatically get a notification saying, hey, your client Deborah might be interested in this property because it meets her parameters. So these are the kinds of things you get if you list with a professional real estate agent such as myself. So it is a seller's market. I strongly urge you, if you're thinking about selling, to go ahead and jump in while the market is still strong for sellers. Rates are still low, so it's a great time to sell. And if you are looking for a real estate professional to assist you with your sale, please, I'm always available. I do free consultations. You can reach out to me via email. It's Alecia at lilbitofrealty.com. Alecia at LILBITOFREALTY.com, or you can give me a call, 786-315-9638, and we will schedule your consultation. I do the consultations in person and via Zoom. And remember, if you are buying or selling in another state and you need a referral, I'd be more than happy to refer you to one of the agents in my network. Even if you're leaving the country, I have agents all over the world, which is awesome. So let me know how I can help. Alecia Daniel Hall, your realtor with a law degree. Ciao.